How could I be so stupid? Why did I do this? Only an idiot would leave a six-figure job without having something else to fall back onto. Those were my exact thoughts. Those were the thoughts that fear had placed deeply inside of me. And that's what I want to talk about in today's video. I really want to get into this concept of fear that so many women have for many different reasons, for many different scenarios in life, and how fear impacted me while I was going through my career burnout and making a big leap, and how I was ultimately able to get through that, and why I talk about career and ambition and your job and those type of things. This really can apply to any area in your life when it comes to fear. Specifically speaking of when you know internally like something needs to change in some way or another, but all of the reasons that we tell ourselves, all of the beliefs that we have keep us stuck in places that we know we should move out of. So with that in mind, in my book, Release and Renew, I dedicate an entire chapter to fear because it really did play a role in my season of burnout. And when people hear my story, they always say, "Oh, Erica, you were so brave," and just all of the things. And for me, it didn't mean that I did not have fear. It just meant that I chose to do it in spite of having fear. And the funny thing about when fear really, here's the thing, when I had made the decision that I was going to leave my corporate six-figure job back in 2022, I knew, like, I was firm in that decision. I had developed an exit plan, that I had laid some things out that I knew I would be, okay for at least 6 months. I had savings again, and I had some other things in order. I was a very good steward over my finances during that time. So I knew that I would be okay. There was still some, those beliefs that we have deep down in us. For me, it was because how I was raised, how you never leave a job without having something else to fall back onto. So I did have that thought kind of going through my head, but at the same time, the condition that my health and wellness was in, like, I knew that was the only option. But I say all that to say is that fear still was there, but fear showed up a little bit different at a different time versus how in my conversations with other women, I see the fear showing up with taking whatever that big leap may be for them. If it's leaving a relationship, if it's leaving a job, if it's moving to a different city, like whatever that may be for them, the fear is around taking that initial leap. My fear wasn't, I would say my paralyzing fear wasn't around taking the initial leap. My fear came in a little bit later. So I'm going to read the opening of chapter 6 in my book, which is titled Fear. The stories we tell ourselves when big decisions must be made. Often fear tells us lies that we must battle against believing. How could I be so stupid? Why did I do this? Only an idiot would leave a six-figure job without having another job to fall back onto. I should have known better. These were all the thoughts that repeatedly went through my head as I stared, I don't have my glasses on, reading my own book. These were all the thoughts that were repeatedly went through my head as I stared at my shrinking savings account. That was the day that fear entered the scene and took the driver's seat in my head. Negative self-talk was on autopilot as I allowed an unexpected series of events to fester mentally, instead of sitting comfortably and confidently in my faith. The thing about fear is that it doesn't mean you don't have faith. Sometimes fear allows you to become more centered in your faith. I wasn't as aware of that then as I am now. So that's how chapter 6 opens, and then it goes into the series of events that happen around the reason why I had fear towards the end of my sabbatical and what that looked like for me. But when it comes to fear, that voice, the voice that fear, is whispering to us, it almost starts to sound like your own voice. At least that was for me. It started to sound like it was my own voice, like it was speaking, logical to me. It was speaking responsibly to me. It was sounding like me. So I wasn't questioning it at the time. I started believing it. And that's kind of what led me on like a little bit of a downward spiral into fear. I had already left the job. I was in my sabbatical. I was probably at this time where I feel like fear really had got a hold of me. I was probably like 8 or 9 months into my sabbatical. I ended up being out taking 10 months, so almost a year. So the fear did not come until much later during my sabbatical. And like I said, it started to sound like myself. Like I was very confident in leaving my job. I knew I had to leave my job. My health and wellness was on the line. And again, I'm not here to tell anybody to leave their job. I'm just sharing my experience. Everyone has to take their own individual walk and do what's best for them. I'm just here sharing my story and take what resonates and leave what doesn't. And just sharing how fear just often just keeps so many women in a chokehold. And again, I'm talking about career, but it could be a relationship. It could be another life-altering event. It could be moving to another city. It could be traveling alone. I remember I had so much fear around traveling alone. Like I would not go places because I couldn't get my friends to go, or my partner's schedule wasn't in alignment, so I just wouldn't go. But one day I just actually, it was after I had finished my master's degree, and I had gifted myself with a ski trip to Colorado. And it was going to be me and my partner. And at the time, he had a job where he could be on call at any time. So he ended up getting called and couldn't go to the trip. And a former version of me would have been like, okay, well, I'll just cancel. I had the travel insurance. We'll just get our money back. But no, I was like, this is a gift to myself and I'm going to go. And me taking that ski trip by myself was one of the most life-altering decisions I could have ever made in my life, in such a good way. It was so freeing. It was so liberating. And that set the groundwork for me to be able to travel on my own. I've traveled domestically and internationally on my own multiple times. And it's something that I will continue to do. But just having that fear of not traveling alone, if I wouldn't have just looked that right in its eye, I would have still been around here in my 40s, waiting for someone else to be able to travel with. And I'm also not saying live life recklessly. Of course, there are healthy doses of fear that keep us safe. You don't want to go trying to go pet a grizzly bear out in the woods somewhere and get attacked, you know what I mean? Or any other things where fear literally keeps us physically safe. I understand all of that. And that's not what I'm speaking about here. I'm more speaking about when all the things that we know internally, we need to fix, change, shift for whatever reasons that may be happening in our lives, that we know we need to do this. But the fear of whatever those stories are keep us stuck, or may keep you stuck. And like I said in the book, I feel like the thing about fear is also, especially for me, I'm a Christian, I believe in God. It didn't mean for me that I didn't have faith. I looked at it, again, this is me reflecting back to that time over 4 years ago. it was the opportunity for me to recenter back in my faith and to really look over my life through all the other times that I was riddled with fear, had a difficult season, whatever it may have been, and be able to look at how God was able to provide, protect, divert, redirect, all of the things. So I knew that he would do the same for me this time, which he ultimately did. And I think a lot of women as well aren't necessarily stuck because they don't know what to do. Again, because internally, whatever that shift may be for you, whatever that change may be for you, internally, you kind of know something needs to change. I just feel like you're stuck because you are believing whatever that voice, of fear is starting to tell you. And it's real. It feels real. It sounds real. And how fear also shows up in your body, how for some people it can be literally paralyzing, like stopping them from moving forward. Sometimes I believe too, and I'm just thinking about this in real time, just because of, again, all the conversations I've had, the book coming out, all of those things. Sometimes I feel like the fear is also, how do I want to say this? Not the fear like something scary is on the other side of that shift or that change, but fear that something good is on the other side of that fear or that change. And how are you going to hold that? Do you have the capacity to hold whatever that good thing is on the other side of that change or that shift? I think that's also something that many people don't talk about. Many people often talk about fear as if people fear that something isn't going to go right or something isn't going to go wrong if they take the leap or the jump in whatever way that may look. But some people have a fear that something good might be on the other side of that. And if they are the person they need to be to receive that, if they have the capacity to hold that, or whatever it may be. I also put in the book here, in each chapter, I have a part called Erica's Mirror, and it just calls out like a reflection about whatever that I talked about in that chapter. And it's normally from like a childhood memory. And in the book, for chapter 6 of fear, I talk about in Erica's Mirror, one of the many wise lessons that my grandmother had told me. And I'm paraphrasing, but she said something along the lines, to me and my cousins when we were little, like, if something happens to you, if something bad happens, if you do something bad, you break something, if anything, don't tell me a lie. Tell me the truth and we can figure out a solution together. And her saying that to me and to my cousins, just in her very calm, loving voice, prior to, anything necessarily going wrong, that just always stuck with me. And I call it out in fear because it's almost like we have to be honest with ourselves about that fear, like address it, look it directly in the eye and tell ourselves the truth. Because when we do that, that's when we can devise a plan, a solution, a strategy to maneuver, shift, move, redirect, whatever it is that is required of us for that step or that shift that we need to make. And yeah, I have in my notes here, when I was in fear, I wasn't telling myself the truth. Like I was just letting almost like the lies that fear was telling me, specifically, oh, you are so dumb for leaving that job. How could you do this? Only an idiot would have left a 6-figure job. Like all of those lies went in my body. I was probably like 8 months into my sabbatical at this point. So I was feeling in my body fantastic. I had already started losing the weight, on the journey to losing all that weight I had gained in burnout. I was on the journey of weaning myself off of those anxiety medications under the supervision of my doctor. So in my body, I was feeling good, but there was still some lies there because I was also, getting ready to, I was feeling ready to go back into corporate America and, getting clear on what I wanted that to look like. But the fear just kind of jumped in at me like, okay, Erica, you're getting back to go back in here. These are the things that can happen to you. You know what I mean? It got really ugly for a few weeks. But again, what I had to do was tell myself the truth when all those lies. Erica, you're feeling great. Look at your body. You look at your mental health, look at your physical health, look at the things you're trying to do. Even when my savings account was, getting low, and you fear like, okay, like, what am I going to do about money? I still have bills to pay. Well, I have a lot of skills. So what I ended up doing, and I talk about this all in the book too, like I started picking up some clinical shifts here and there because I could do that on my time, so I would go to the hospital, pick up a clinical shift on a Tuesday, on a Thursday, work to be able to get money. I picked up some freelance work. So again, when that fear tried to get to me like, okay, girl, you see your savings is getting low. What are you going to do? Well, I have other things that I can do while I'm still preparing myself to go back into corporate America and aligning myself with the right type of job. I wasn't, pouring myself with, toxic positivity or, trying to hype myself up like in a toxic kind of way. I was just being honest, telling myself the truth. Yes, these things are happening. Yes, your savings is getting low, but here are some other ways that you readily have access to make money until you are ready to go back into corporate America, or not necessarily ready, but find the aligned position that is going to meet your needs in the season that you're in. And for me, just again, being honest, telling myself the truth, like looking fear right in the eye, that's where the clarity came for me. And again, I just wanted to have this conversation today around fear because I know fear is a big deal today. That like there's a lot of things to be, fearful of, the things that are going on in the world. Just if you're looking at this today in 2026, or if you're looking at this years from now, I'm sure there's always something, going on in the world to, bring fear upon us. But I'm just a true believer in focusing on the things that I can control, because far as we know, we just have this one life to live in these human bodies. And I want to live the most calm, joyful, happy life doing aligned and meaningful work in a way where I can offer my gifts, my skills, my talents, my educations in a way that feels aligned for me. So fear is real. You will definitely feel it no matter, again, what area of your life you may need to make a shift in. But that doesn't mean that everything fear is telling you is necessarily true. So let me know in the comments if any of this resonated with you, because it definitely resonated with me, and not so much when I was getting ready to leave the job, but it happened after I had already left. And the fear kind of started to kick in, that I dedicated an entire chapter to my book about fear. So let me know if any of this resonates with you. If you've missed any of the other conversations I've had on this 100-day journey, I've linked them down I've linked the playlist in the description box. And we are steadily trucking along on these 100 days. I believe today's video is day 77. So we are definitely getting close to that 100 days. I appreciate you for watching, for your likes, for your comments. It's definitely been an adventure, and my energy is a little bit low today. I've had a full work week of work in my 9 to 5 and in my business that requires a lot of energy from me. So my energy is a little bit low today. But let me know how this topic of fear resonates with you. If you've ever had a season where you allowed fear to stop you from a shift, a change, a pivot that you knew you needed to do, and how you were able to overcome that. What steps did you take to do so? I'm Erica Prevail. I share daily conversations helping ambitious women rework their relationship with ambition, capacity, rest, and creativity. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.